Right, hello there. So we're continuing our investigation, our look at IMVU Studio, the new creator tool from IMVU that they are pushing out for everyone to be using at some point in the future. So let me just drop the links for it into chat. So yesterday we took a rather confused look at Studio. Copy, paste. So that's discussions. That's where you can, or that's where you should be dropping comments and issues with Studio for IMVU to take on board, because they need it's in beta, so that means it's still in development, but IMVU are looking for as much feedback as they can get. And this is the app. And as yesterday, or as was said yesterday, it's compatible at the moment for Windows and Mac OS, because they've had to update IMVU for Mac anyway, which has prompted them to get this sorted out. But yesterday we were looking at IMVU Studio. So we were just taking a look at this, which is basically Studio. And I've forgotten the... So as we discovered yesterday, so what we see at the moment is what they've got set up. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is what Studio will be, because hopefully we may very well end up with a lot of creator information on this initial screen, and hopefully, or it would be nice if we had our tier information messages from IMVU that are specifically towards creators. So all the creator dashboard stuff basically. So if that appeared on this initial page, that would be rather nice. But at the moment it's just showing products and projects. So cleared up the list from yesterday, but these are all the locally created projects that have not yet been submitted. And of course we have submitted projects or submitted products, and then all the stuff that's published. I guess submitted are products that are submitted but are hidden, so they're not public. I'm not quite sure what the categorization is, or the rationale behind why, or what the difference is between submitted projects and published projects. So hopefully we'll get clarification on that. But from the point of view of creating, we're doing all the creating now. We just click this big button in the top right corner, and it brings up this screen that, instead of showing us just the generic defaults, So instead of showing just the top, bottom shoe here, so the base, the root categories of products, as we have in the old legacy client, I guess this is going to be called from now on, we now have all the products that are available. Oh, there's some branded stuff there. All the products that are available for derivation. And again, it's not clear what the order is in terms of why these particular products crop up the way that they do. But we can select what we want to derive. So it's all clothing, tops, bottoms, shoes, what's body parts? Oh, so they've broken that down. Okay, so hair, eyelashes, and of course one thing to note is that all of these products that are being shown are not local. I think maybe not. It's probably just because there are so few root products or categories that they load quickly. But we've also got male. Good morning, doll. Taking a look at the new Studio Beta. So we've got all the male clothing. Rooms and furniture. And again, it's not clear how this is categorized. So it may be a reflection of the popularity of products in the main catalog. I'm not sure how they are being listed. But let's, for the sake of argument, let's do a top. So we can select our item and it shows on the right preview and the derivation tree or the derivation chain, and this may or may not be useful for those that particularly care about it, because it depends obviously on, let's go for one that's a bit more obvious to see. So that's got a derivation chain of a few items. So you can click back through the derivation chain all the way back to the original, or just click the icon again and it shows you the, and that can be convenient for whatever reason. So if you just want to change the color of this particular design, you can select that derivation, but if you want to alter that design, you can go all the way back up the tree to select the item. So let's just click on that, click the drive button. Excuse me. And it opens the project in the client. So just to recap what we were doing yesterday, left click, drag rotates, right click strafes, and middle mouse scroll zooms. You can also click hold middle mouse and that will rotate. but the rotate also is left to right and then limited up and down or top to bottom. So that's the project loaded into the 3D view, so we can now edit this. And on the left, on the left we now have all the components that are included or involved with the product. So we've got materials, meshes, and then actions. Obviously no actions for this. So we've got tons of materials, and as we select each one, so we click on it, it shows its properties on the right. And we've got our traditional diffuse and opacity, but we've also got normal and shininess, and we'll be taking a look at those today. And to edit those, we just select the entry that we want to look at in the material list, and then change or edit the properties on the right. And it's the same for meshes. So this being one of those multi-mesh products, we can select an entry and check our mesh elements, and it would be the same for actions. So we can click on assets, and that should, oh no, it won't do it for this because this is a derivation. But if this were an imported, so if you were importing your own mesh, it would show the assets. So the components essentially would be listed as assets and the hierarchy shown, depending on what that was. So then on the right, so we've got all our editing components, the bits that we can edit. So textures, and then all the texture or material properties. And then we have all our animation, texture animation stuff. We have to scroll down to the bottom, enable, disable. So we can still do animated textures. Whoops. Inventory. So this was a bit confusing yesterday. So if you wanted to reset the avatar so that you were looking at the default, which is what we have now, you have to click on filters all. You have to click on that text to get this little pop-up, and then we can filter what the avatar is wearing, so we can remove it or add it depending on what it is that we wanted to do. Oh, that messed up yesterday, and it's still messing up. There's no avatar showing, but we can toggle those on and off by clicking them. Where's the avatar gone? Oh, there it is. We still can't scroll or rotate the scene down so that we can look under things. So like furniture items and rooms, you can't look underneath rooms. Oh, that was one thing. Speaking of panels, when you click on an image now, so if you want to add something, you get this little thumbnail pop-up, but if you click on the actual icon, we now get a panel pop-up. So if you're familiar with Photoshop, an image editor, this might be familiar. So loading images, we just click on add image and then select our image as we would do as we did before, and that loads it into the pop-up, which automatically drops it into the respective texture component that we're editing, and each one, so this might be a bit overwhelming with larger projects, each one has its own panel. So having to edit a lot of textures might end up with a lot of panels all over the screen. Right, so today that's the basics of the editor. So there's a few other things that we covered yesterday, but today what we're going to look at are normal maps and shininess maps, and what we need to do to basically make those. So let's close this, don't save, we can delete that. So click on the 3 dots, delete, confirm. So I'm just going to open a simple project that was created to test this. So we've got this little cube that has a normal and shininess map assigned to it. And the normal map might be tricky to see, but the shininess won't. And we can see the shininess effect in this area. And it might be just possible to make out, as I move this, the effect of the normal map, which is defining each of these bricks. So we're getting a slight edge on each of these bricks. So that is the normal map doing that. The normal map defines these sort of pseudo-structural details, so it makes things look slightly three-dimensional, whereas the shininess is obviously the shiny reflective element of the project. Which is probably going to be overused by PVC creators, as we mentioned yesterday. But that is normal maps and shiny maps, shininess maps. But so I have to do this again. Right, so create a male clothing top, empty clothing. So that shows the preview of what we're looking at. Derive. So that's our empty clothing. We're going to import an Fbx file. So we click on the 3 thingamajigs in the top left corner there. Don't know what those are called. So click on that, file, edit, and then import. That import should really be under file, because we're not really editing an import, we're importing. So anyway, semantics. Import mail, whoops, Fbx. So we select the Fbx after we've browsed for it. This is the Fbx Importer. So set up Fbx. You can skip it if you want, but 0.01 because we're using Blender. We want to select 86 bones and 1 mesh. Mesh ID, we want this to be 5. No, we don't want this to be 5. We want this to be a random one because we want this to be worn over the top of the skin. Next. It's got our texture. Next. No animation. Review. And then import. So that's imported. Now we have to click preview. And as we discussed yesterday, preview now sends the data to IMVU for authentication, I guess, and then back. So there's going to be a delay. There's going to be a delay between clicking preview and seeing our project, unlike so doing the same thing in the old creator. Load FBX. So the process is pretty much the same. Import. And then apply changes, and it happens instantly. But with Studio, that isn't going to be instant because it's authenticating the data or doing something that requires it to send the data back and forth. So we want to get rid of everything that's being worn. So we mouse over the icons when we select in use, click the minus button icon thing that appears, and that'll just remove them. Let's get rid of everything. That is a very creepy look. Right, so what we have, so there we go, there's the asset tab, and it's showing the assets that are associated with the imported FBX. So what it's actually doing still is using the Fbx file or the format as a container for all the components. So it's still bringing in the necessary data and converting it to XMF files. So XMF, AF, SF, PF and RF. So let's select our material. There we go. And add a normal map to this. So click, add an image. Normal map, open. It adds it, so it's automatically added to the slot. Shininess, add image, I will just use that for now. And it's done the same thing again, so that's added to that map. Let's close those, click preview. and wait a little bit. And voila, there is our normal map and shininess map associated with the product. Excuse me. And as yesterday, the effect is responding to the scene lighting. So wherever there is a light within the scene, the shininess and normal map will behave with respect to the light. So the reason for loading these two projects in, let me just save this. So file, save as. And now, finally, we can see what our tabs are referencing. Instead of editor 1, editor 2, editor 3, or however, and trying to work out what each of those is, we now have names for them. So hooray for that. But anyway, so the reason for loading these two in is because they demonstrate the two main ways of using normal maps, well, and shininess maps as well, but normal maps in particular. So this product and the normal map that's associated with it was designed specifically for the product. So the product mesh defines the normal map. So it can't be used for anything else. Whereas the one for the brick is just a brick texture, and it can be used for all sorts of things because it's a generic tileable. In this instance, it's a tileable texture, but the way that this is made differs to the way that... Have we crashed it? I think we crashed it. Oh, what is it doing? Oh, that was a bit weird. Not sure why it's done that. So we have to do this again then. So that was a bit buggy. So get rid of all of this. So basically having to do all of this removal really does mean that we are no longer going to be able to currently edit products offline. So everything is going to be online. You can save projects locally, but I don't know if we can edit them offline with no internet access. So that needs to be clarified whether that's going to be possible, because I know that a lot of questions, and well, that's a top request, is to be able to edit projects offline without needing to be online. So whether that's going to be included or not, or whether it's even possible, I don't know. But anyway, back to the normal maps. So this is a unique normal map, and it's designed specifically for this product. And this isn't. This is a tileable or a generic normal map. And the way that you make both of these is very different. Well, it can be the same, but for ease of demonstration, they're different ways of making things. So what I need to do, new, open, now I've got to find it first. I think it's that one. Just have to reset the scene and reestablish the defaults, because importing older Blender 2.8 series files into newer versions doesn't quite work. So this is going to kill. So let's hide these bits. I want Gillet mesh. Get rid of the skeleton. Let's leave the head in place. So this is how the normal map for this is created. So what you do essentially is you have your product mesh. That's going to be called a low resolution version, and then we have a much higher resolution version of the same thing that we can use to create or bake the normal maps from. So the normal maps are basically a conversion of the detail that we can see on the high resolution mesh. They are converted to pixel colors. So those extreme purpley, bluish, greenish colors, each one of those represents the structure and the orientation of a surface. So each surface is orientated in a particular direction, and the normal map is basically a 2D representation of that orientation that can be applied to a low resolution mesh so that it looks like it's high resolution. And in Blender, the way that we can create these is by creating a low resolution product mesh. So this is what we would actually be using in IMVU. That's what you would export as your FBX or Cal 3D file. And then our high resolution mesh sits over the top of that, and we do something called texture baking. Now we can't do this in, oh, we are in cycles, right? So for Blender users, to do that, I have to make sure that you are in cycles render engine. So we click on cycles, so we've got our engines, because what we want are the bake options, and we don't have those in Eevee. So if I have those available or shown and switch to Eevee, they disappear. We don't have the bake options in Eevee. And to bake, what we're essentially doing is converting or transferring that three-dimensional structure information to our low-resolution mesh via its UV map. Where's this thing gone? So that's our UV map for the product. So the high resolution mesh structure will be transferred or translated to fill in all this stuff within the UV map. So I don't know if this will work live. Whoops. So to do that, we select the high res, select the low res, and then in render properties, in bake, we select from the bake type list normal. We can swizzle this, which we may need to do for IMVU, but we'll see. We want selected to active. So what that's doing is transferring or copying or converting the data from the high resolution mesh, which is selected first, to the low resolution mesh, which is the selective or active object. And then we just click the bake button. Hopefully this will work. There is something that I needed to do for this, but I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. Oh, that's right. Oh no, those are okay. So one of the things to watch out for is the scale difference between IMVU and Blender's default. Oh, there we go, it is. So because Blender, or because IMVU is 100%, 100 times larger than IMVU, we have to fiddle with the ray distance, and this is the thing that calculates all this structure and converts it, or it analyzes the structure of both meshes, and if they are too close together, we get this. We get these bits. Because basically they're too close together, and that interferes with the conversion process, and that's due to the scale difference between Blender's defaults and IMVU, which is 100 times larger. So we have to increase the ray distance, and 10 should be okay. So that produces our nice normal map, which we can then save, and that is what's loaded into the texture slot, which gives us our three-dimensional structure. So that's a unique normal map that's produced specifically for this product. And a sort of incidental advantage of this might reduce theft, because this normal map can't be used on another product. So unless there was a way to nobble the actual mesh itself and the assets, just the assets on their own won't work with another project, because the asset or the texture won't match the UV map. So this may inadvertently mitigate theft. So that's one way of making normal maps. We have to bake them, high resolution detailed mesh to a low resolution product mesh. Whoops. And obviously to get your high resolution, you can use sculpting for this. Where's it gone? View, frame all. So I don't know how clearly that's going to come through. So you can just sculpt your high resolution details that you want, and then bake that to your normal map to apply to your low res. Or you can manually edit the high resolution by increasing the amount of structural detail you have in your low res. But it's largely going to be a sort of a personal preference thing. But I suspect most people will just use the sculpt tools and just sculpt. So that's one way of making normal maps. The other, which is the brick texture, is in your image editor. So let's create a new image, 256 by 256. And for this, I'll actually, right, so there should be one on Cat's Bits. So there are a lot of normal map tutorials on Cat's Bits. If you want to get into the more detailed elements of making normal maps using 3D meshes. Right, make normal map from Thoto. Right, so this tutorial is going to be essential reading for your normal maps, how not to make normal maps. So basically the other way of making normal maps is to convert a grayscale image using a special tool designed for the job. Now there are lots of these available. Some of them are free, like NJob, and some of them cost money. Some of them are they are filters and plugins for things like GIMP and Photoshop. And what these do is convert the grayscale values to normal maps, or the colors that we see. So these blue colors, what it does is it converts the black is a recessed structure, white is a protruding structure, and then the grey values in between are various ups and downs depending on the Well, let's do one. So it's best to start with a mid-tone. And then what we can do then, so this is our midpoint. What we can do then is draw out some shapes, or paint, doesn't really matter. So what this will do is, let's get a white one in there as well. So what this does is it converts the tonal values into representations of height. White is the top, darker colours, black, is the bottom. Let's add a black one in there as well. This is Infinity Photo, by the way, if anyone's interested. And the depth that's created depends on a sort of the average tonal range, which is why you kind of start off with a grey value, because the height will be relative to the mid-tone and the dark value. And what we can do is this, save as, stick this in furniture. Export TGA. Want to use TGA or a compression, a lossless compressed image format for this. Export. So what we can do with that is load it into our image converter. So I have to find the image. So that is our image. Unfortunately, I can't scroll to make this bigger. And it gives us some filters. Height map to normal map. And it does this to them. It converts the colors based on their relative tonal value to one another, but let's just go with that. Okay, so it's converted it to a normal map. Save as. PNG. So we've got our normal map, which we can then load into our normal map slot. Which has now replaced our brick texture, but we need to update the preview. or preview update. And we can see, although it's not quite as, oh that's right, because this has been mapped wonky, but we can see the normal map effect just in this top corner. Can't see it too clearly on this particular object because of the way that it was made for testing something else. But that is a normal map. But, and this is the difference, this is the this is something that's important to consider when you're making normal maps this way. If you're using your 2D editor to make normal maps, it's best to think of them in terms of surface detail rather than structural detail. So what we could do to this let's make that quite aggressive. Apply. Export. Let's do that again. Where's EndJob gone? Oh, has it crashed? But it's best to think of these normal maps as surface details rather than structural details. So we'll see what that does, or see what that means. So open. Normal map test 2. Save as PNG. Right, so if we load this version, it's kind of annoying how it resets the view. But we can see the normal effect much more aggressively as a surface detail rather than a structural detail. Because what it doesn't do is it doesn't convert although it knows that these are tonal different, they're different tonally. It doesn't understand that they represent or should represent different height values. So what ends up happening is the normal map that's produced. Let's load that into where is it? So if we wanted to, the reason why we're using the different colors is to get a difference in height. But if we look at the way that the normal map's actually been produced, the border around each of these elements is the same width, and they are more or less the same tonal values depending on where they are. So it doesn't create a larger border on the white one just because it's a white tonal value, because it can't determine that height difference. It doesn't understand the height difference. So we can use image generated normal maps to create surface effect much better than we can with structural effects. So if we wanted, like I say, we wanted the white area, which is this bit at the top, to be much higher than the black area at the bottom, we'd have to physically model that or do something to the 2D image to give that impression of height, and that can be tricky with an image versus 3D structure. So that is one thing to watch out for, the difference between making a normal map from a 3D structure like our Gile versus making it from a 2D image. So for example, let's say for example, if you were deriving from this Gile and you wanted to use the normal map that's already included with the product, but you wanted to add a plastic brand or name tag to the product, you could add that by doing something simple like this. Well, actually like this. To get that area defined, which would then be it'll be interesting to see how IMVU Studio handles this actually, to see whether you can actually add detail on top of normal maps. Because what you might be able to do, or what we might have to do, is let's load in the Gile normal map so we can see. Where is that? Too many projects. So that's the Gile's normal map. So what will be interesting to see is whether we can, so let's just say we wanted to add a name tag there. So what we would want to do is basically convert this. So let's just flood fill this. It shouldn't really matter really, so 127. Whoops. Don't know how easy that is to see actually, so let me just make that lighter. So what we would want to do is convert this to a normal map. So we would export it, open the image into our normal converter image converter, and then produce the normal map. But because we are wanting to add this to the Gile, would we then be able to use an opacity map to cut out the bits that we want to keep, this section. So our opacity map would be that. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting actually, because I don't know how. Because what we don't want to be doing, or what you don't want to do, is edit normal maps directly. You don't want to be painting on top of them. So you don't want to be changing things by editing the actual normal maps. Ideally, what we want to be able to do is to mask out areas that we want to add to the normal map, which then gets blended together to produce the effect that we're after. So we'd then be able to, with a normal map in place, we'd then have our 3D texture in place, because I can't imagine people making their normal maps available for use as well. So that'll be interesting to see what they do there actually. In fact, that is actually something that needs to be looked at, because you shouldn't modify normal maps at all. That's one thing that we shouldn't be doing. But if you wanted to add detail to the normal map, the way you would ordinarily do it would be to blend the normal maps. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works. Because what you would do, right, so let me just hide that. Save as. Yeah, so no talky bits whilst concentrating. Not that concentrating when you're talking anyway, but avatar. Because this is actually quite important. Right, so open. Right, so that's the Gillet. So we'll convert that to a normal map. That's okay. Save that. Save as. What was that called? Right, because normally when you modify a normal map, what you'd want to be doing in this particular context, so if you were deriving from the Gillet and wanting to add something to it in terms of structural detail or the impression of, arrange. Now, where is it? Oh. What you would normally do in a image editor is use a blend mode. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's overlay. But what that does with a bit of editing is it adds the modified detail to the normal map via blending. You'd have to then re-normalize this so to make sure that all the colors were valid normal values. But this is what you would normally do if you were just doing something quickly like this in terms of adding some very simple detail to a normal map. But in Studio, what are they going to do from the point of view of, are they expecting people to hand out their normal maps and shininess maps for editing, or will we be able to modify normal maps based on just adding and blending layers together as we were doing here? So that's going to be an interesting thing to clarify, whether that's possible or whether it means that creators have to include normal maps and their shininess maps on the product page so that people can derive from them. So I'm not sure how creators would necessarily feel about that. But anyway, it means that it is possible to add detail to a normal map that was created from a 3D object, but not necessarily the other way around. I mean, you could. So if your normal map was originally that, you could do it the other way around and essentially blend the gilet or something that's do the same thing but the other way around. So you can add 3D detail to a 2D created image. But the upshot of all of this is essentially just that there are two main ways of making normal maps. 3D structure. So we're baking high res to low res mesh, so that's the product mesh, and or we are converting grayscale images using a conversion tool like njob into a normal map that can then be placed on a product. So that's normal maps, which was a bit long-winded, but shininess maps are a lot easier because you can literally use the same image grayscale values. So we can use this image that we've created, so we export, and we've already exported that. Let's just drop that in on our brick. So click, add image. Let's go with the bumpy one. That adds it. Oh. It's got to be a PNG. It doesn't like TGAs for some reason. So export PNG. This may very well be a bug because it does know that there are TGA images there, but it just doesn't render them. More. Export. So we can drop that into where did that get saved? Oh. There it is, shininess. Why didn't that load? Preview. And there is our, whoops. Come on. And there's our shininess assigned to the cube. So it is just grayscale values. But you want to be quite subtle with them depending on how much shininess you want. So this would be a highly reflective or highly shiny surface. So shininess is the much easier of the two to make. So you can make products without a normal map and just shininess or opacity and diffuse and still get decent products. Let's add that to our Gillet. So this waiting could be a bit frustrating. So we can't quite... Oh, that looks like gold. So we can see just about that there's a hard line here where it's shiny on this section but dull on this section. So that's what we can do with shininess, and it's pretty effective. But we don't need a normal map for it to work, although the normal map enhances the shininess aspect. I can see that this preview waiting is going to be quite frustrating for some, especially if they're on bad internet connections. Right, so we've lost the normal map now, but we've kept the shininess, and it's still producing a relatively good product, or a relatively good effect. So we can see, whoops, so we've got a relatively smooth, flat shininess effect on this section, but a sort of pimply effect on this. So we can actually use the shininess. The way that we design our shininess maps will define the type of shiny effect that we get. So the bright, shiny, solid area is going to be the solid colors, and the pimply effect is obviously going to be the pebble dash, or the noisy area. So using a combination of the two is going to be interesting to see what sort of effects that can be had with just shininess on its own. Let's say, for example, let's do page width 512. So let's color tint this. Whoops, not white. Add noise. Can't see that. Filters. Add noise. So let's try making it more subtle. Apply. Save as. Save this as a PNG. Let's drop that into our shininess slot. So we've now got a solid texture, but it's noisy. So we're getting a preview of the preview delay in real time. So that's what that diffuse noisiness has created. So let's do one that's more aggressive, see what that looks like. export PNG. So that's that one. That's the subtle noisy one. And this is the more aggressive noisy one. Yeah, I can see that this preview delay is going to drive people nuts. Uh-oh. Let's see if we can force it. Is it doing anything? It's not doing anything. Oh dear. So let's try loading the normal map back in. I think we broke it. Could do with a progress bar. That's it here somewhere, where we can see what it's doing. It doesn't like that at all. Yes, it doesn't like that, so let's close that. Don't save. Let's close both of them. Don't save. Get the Gile normal map test back up. Let's try that again. Right, so we have to reset the avatar so we can see this. So click on Filters All again. That should really be a button. So we can kind of get an idea that this is actually when we're working with the assets themselves and trying to reset the avatar or do something else, add things to the scene, we can see that it currently is quite a slow process. compared to the legacy or the creator. Right, so we've got our avatar back. Inspector. So let's try that again. So add our image. So Gillet Shiny. So this is the subtle one. So that applies a uniform effect over the entire thing. Which makes it look like gold or bronze, which is interesting. So that's the subtle noise texture. So let's add the really noisy one. Did it do it? No, it doesn't like that. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Don't save. Let's reload it. And this time, let's just add the really noisy. So we're getting a real preview of what it's like with loading the assets and essentially just managing them, managing our projects. When we open a project, it doesn't appear instantly like it does with the old creator, but if, as we were discussing yesterday, if this means that, so what's the trade-off? Do we want more secure, a more secure asset creation process that's more difficult to lift assets from, you know, so it mitigates mesh theft or texture theft? Or do we want projects to load and be managed much more quickly? So which is more important? Asset security on the off chance that something is stolen versus project management speed or the capabilities of being able to do that reasonably well. So now we have to reset the avatar again, in use. Because that the speed at which the process works is actually an important aspect of the creation process. So if it's going to be slow, or much slower than it currently is, because all the assets are being authenticated and sent back to IMVU, or whatever is going on that is causing the delay, is the benefit that that provides greater than the delays and the impingement that it causes to the process? Right, so we've reset the avatar. let's load this texture in directly. So this is our really noisy one. Let's see if it loads this. If not, then it could be something to do with the image that's causing problems, which is a little odd. It has. So there is the really noisy one. So we can use the shininess map, and we've also got this reflectivity option as well that reduces the effect. Yeah, see, because that's going to be frustrating if just changing an option is going to mean a 30 or 60-second wait between refreshing the project is the benefit that's provided by the security worth the delay that's added to the process itself. So that's our really aggressive. So we can use our shininess maps to not just highlight the structure of the normal map, we can use it almost independently of the fact that there's it does that. We can use it almost independently of the normal map just by, or just to, emphasize a surface detail or a surface effect in terms of, cloth. We've got the folds of the cloth or the fabric provided by the normal map, but then we've got maybe the type of fabric or the type of effect. So this could be glitter, for example, although it's a bit rough and ready for glitter. But this could be used to emphasize the glittery surface versus the structure that's provided by the normal map. So we can kind of use them. Why isn't that? Oh, it's underneath. So we can kind of use them independently of one another to emphasize different visual aspects of a product. But specular maps or shininess maps are much easier to create than normal maps. And even without the normal map, so let's decouple that preview. So we're going to lose the three-dimensionality of the normal map. When it gets around to updating. There we go. So we've lost the normal map effect, but we've kept the shininess, which still works with diffuse. So there's quite a lot of different variations that can be created depending on what you want to do. So that is normal maps and shininess maps. Let's make this really, really super shiny. See what that looks like. I have to close these. Why is it not letting me do that now? So as we can see, it's quite buggy. It won't let me change the value now. Yeah, it's won't let me change the value. But anyway, so diffuse. So we've got our opacity map, normal map, and then shininess map. Oh, and as per yesterday, it's not clear what's going to happen with legacy products rather. So if you make products with this, with IMVU Studio Beta, it's unlikely they will work, but it's unlikely that the normal maps and the shininess maps will work in the older client. So these will essentially be disabled, and all people will see is whatever is in the diffuse channel. So this one. So that's something to keep in mind when you're using Studio is legacy support. But that's normal maps and shininess maps in IMVU Studio Beta. So we're creating normal maps either from baking high resolution meshes down to low resolution meshes, or creating them from converting 2D images. And they have their pros and their cons depending on what it is that you're doing. So yeah, that's IMVU Studio Beta, normal maps and shininess maps. Well, we've been going for about an hour and 3/4, so we shall call it quits there. I'm not quite sure what the next video will be about. Oh, now it'll let me do it. So let's turn that right up to 90. Waiting, waiting, waiting. I'm sorry, Dave, but I can't allow you to do that. Oof. That's super shiny. So there's quite a lot of things that can be done with this. And it'll help PVC creators immensely. So we'll call it quits there, and we'll see what's going to be done in the next video. It might be a room, might be something else, don't know. So that's 2 videos on Studio. It's worth downloading. Drop the links in again. So this is where you grab it. On the support forum. Whoops. So that's the support forum. And if you want to get into making normal maps, make absolutely sure that you read this, and I do mean read it, because it tells you everything that you need to know in verbose detail, what you need to be thinking of when you are making your normal maps. But then what you can also do is look at the tutorials for more general tutorials about making normal maps. So depending on whether it's a tiling normal map, a normal map that has to tile, so that would be something like grass or rock, versus these are for the older version of Blender, so these will be updated for Blender 2.8, but the basic principles still apply. Versus something like this, which is normal mapping something that's unique. Right, so it's an hour and 3/4, so we'll call it quits there, and we shall see you on the next video. Again, I don't know what that's going to be about, so we'll see. Right, bye for now, everyone.